Welcome back. Breaking news out of Poland. After days of negotiation, delegates from nearly 200 nations have reached an agreement to put the 2015 Paris Climate Treaty into action. Senior international correspondent Nick Paton-Walsh joins us now from Katowice, Poland, with the details. We were just speaking last hour, Nick, about a number of sticking points. How did the delegates now reach this consensus?
Well, as we last spoke, we were hearing the positive news. They were mid-speech, and after we finished talking, we heard the presidents here of this climate change summit refer to a historic moment. They now have nearly 200 countries on paper agreeing to rules as to how they will limit damaging greenhouse gases. Now, the Paris Agreement, spearheaded by the Obama administration, that was about setting the tone. Countries saying they wanted to do something about global warming. This summit has been about the how, the rules, the transparency, and how you're actually sure that countries are doing what they said they would do. Remember, we have 12 years in which to keep global warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius or see catastrophic change. You're seeing bits of it in the storms that are hitting the east coast of the US now. A lot of that extreme weather is linked to man-made change in the environment and also forest fires ravaging parts of California. It's happening. Here, we've had a couple of hurdles. We had last weekend the US, with strange bedfellows of Russia and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, refused to welcome one of the major scientific reports that this whole thing is based upon. That cast a tone of negativity over things. And just in the last day or so, Brazil, who are really the owners of the lungs of the planet, the Amazon rainforest, they wanted a tweak or different kind of reforms to how people trade emission reductions. There's a complicated market here, but they really were looking out for themselves in all of that. That argument has been kicked down the road to discussion at the next major meeting like this, and the US and Russian rejection of the science has been sort of absolved by a slight tweaking of the language here. They don't welcome the science, they welcome the timely completion of the science, i.e. not the content, just the fact it was done on time. That's got some people here angry, but essentially the broader takeaway from tonight has been that they have got this rule book underway. Anna?
Nick, obviously the U.S. is one of the nations that have pulled out of this Paris Climate Accord. So what have the Americans been doing at this conference?
Well, it's sort of been a two-pronged approach. I mean, they're out in November 2020, so they're still technically in. They've said they're leaving. But we've seen a two-pronged approach here. On the sidelines, key US political officials, they held a side event promoting fossil fuels. There were protests that shouted them down. It was a bit of a mess, frankly, but at the end of the day, the message they brought here was to promote the very same greenhouse gases which are really causing the damage everyone's concerned about. That's simply a fact. It's going to do terrific damage to the planet in the decade ahead. But we also have heard of a different track where some of the career diplomats who've been working on this perhaps for over a decade weren't that obstructive in some of the meetings. They seem to have let things continue. In fact, I spoke to a couple of US officials on the sidelines here, and they had almost allergic reaction to seeing me as part of the media. They're keeping a low profile. They don't appear to have done much actual technical derailing so far, because we have got an agreement like this going through, but politically there's been a lot of ill will, frankly. One key minister I spoke to here saying, look, it doesn't matter if people simply want to reject the science here. The science isn't going to change. It's a fact. It's been unhelpful, but I think we have two things really here to look at. One, there is now a rule book for how greenhouse gases will be reduced. There are some holes in it. It's not perfect and it needs further work, but it's there now, and that was something people briefly thought may not come out of this, and that would have been terrible. But secondly, we're lacking something, and that's the same kind of international consensus about the problem of climate change that we got from the Paris Agreement in 2015. The Obama administration put everybody on the same page here. They were all singing the same song. Here, a lot of that has had a sort of rather unpleasant undertone of climate change denial, the rejection of the science, but also, too, some key countries very much looking out for their own bottom line and themselves here, Anna. But possibly a bit of good news with a pretty serious caveat in there. Thanks, Anna.
Indeed. Thank you for your reporting, Nick.